So now let me start. Namaskar, everyone. Welcome to the inaugural session of the much-awaited NIAC interview series. My name is Shreya Nepal. I am the Executive Officer for Nepal International ADR Center, NIAC. NIAC is an accessible and credible alternative dispute resolution center based in Kathmandu, Nepal. We offer arbitration, mediation, negotiation, and other dispute resolution services to domestic, cross-border, and international parties. NIAC was founded in 2013 and restructured as a non-profit company in 2020. It was founded by a multidisciplinary group of retired judges, senior advocates, chartered accountants, management consultants, professors, academics, and arbitrators alike, most of whom are present with us here today. My humble greetings to you all as well. NIAC was established with the noble aim of providing international standard dispute resolution services to clients so as to develop Nepal as a leading arbitral hub in the region. Subsequently, improving its economic standards and global recognition. We are also the constituent member of the Asia Pacific Center for Arbitration and Mediation APCAM, through which we provide an international roster of arbitrators, mediators, and a uniform rule and fee schedule to be applied universally in all member countries. As part of our engagement in creating, enhancing, and applying knowledge and skills in dispute resolution, we have envisioned this NIAC interview series, where we invite arbitration experts from all over the world to come and talk to us about their arbitral journeys, their life lessons, advice they have for NIAC and Nepal, and to let the global community of arbitrators learn about NIAC and its work. At the inaugural session of the NIAC interview series, we wanted to bring someone not just with years of experience in the international arbitration field, but someone who has given back to the arbitral community through their projects. Being a woman myself, I wanted to bring to you someone I could look up to and proudly ask you to do the same. Thus, I bring to you from Hong Kong, Ms. Louise Barrington. Ms. Barrington has over 30 years of experience in international commercial arbitration. First, as the director of the ICC's Institute of World Business Law. Then, as the founding director of ICC Asia in Hong Kong. She has worked as a counsel or arbitrator in a number of cases involving construction, international trade, CISG, banking, financial transactions, and intellectual property. And she has dealt with cases involving, believe it or not, European, Hong Kong, Chinese, French, English, Vietnamese, Korean, Qatari, Nigerian, American, and of course, Canadian law, and has taught international law and dispute resolution on 5 continents. And you can look it up. She is on the rosters of most of the major arbitral institutions of the world. Talking about giving back to the community, she has co-founded Arbitral Women, which promotes women in dispute resolution, and the Viz East Moot in Hong Kong, an educational experience for law students from around the world, which she has directed for 18 years. She divides her time between bases in Paris, Hong Kong, and Toronto. We've managed to borrow her time for a bit as she is in Hong Kong for the Hong Kong Arbitration Week. Welcome to NIAC, Ms. Louise.
Thank you, Shreya, for that very generous introduction. And thank you also, everyone, for inviting me. I'm very honored to be the first interviewee in this series. And I'm delighted that it's Nepal, which is a place I love very much.
Okay, so let's just get started with the questions. Okay, so as I've mentioned earlier, you've been involved in international commercial arbitration for over 30 years now. First with the ICC, then teaching and training all over the world. You were one of Asia's first charter arbitrators in the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators way back in 2001. And now you practice as a full-time arbitrator and mediator. What actually got you interested in arbitration? And how did you get involved in it professionally?
It's a really fun question because I didn't start out as an arbitrator, or I wasn't even doing international law. I trained in Canada and I was doing I was doing, I'm not quite sure what's happening there. Is that me? No, it's not me. Okay. I was practicing law in Ontario for a few years and then went to France, where I enrolled in an international law course. And it was there that I met some French professors who were involved in international arbitration, and they were teaching international arbitration as part of this international law course. And at the time, it was at the time of the Pyramid Plateau case in Egypt, which had been stopped after UNESCO said, halt, you can't put a casino on the Pyramid Plateau. And so we were actually following this case as it was happening with Professor Emmanuel Gaillard, who was the teacher at the time. And that's what made me fall in love with arbitration. I just thought, this is what I want to do. And it was a long road to get there, but that's when it started.
Okay, that's very interesting to hear, ma'am. Well, you've traveled all over the world, been involved in arbitration as a counsel and as an arbitrator in so many different jurisdictions. Have you ever been to Nepal? Do you know anything about the arbitration scene in Nepal?
Well, actually, when I was with ICC Asia, and that was between 1997 and 2000,
Mhm.
I did travel to Kathmandu a couple of times, and I was
Okay.
working with the Chamber of Commerce at the time.
Mhm.
We were setting up ICC Nepal, and that's how Dr. Yog and I got to know each other,
Okay.
because he came to one of those seminars, I believe, and he can tell you about that. But we've been friends ever since. And I went back another time as well, also for the ICC. At
Mhm.
that time, there was not a lot happening in international arbitration and not a huge amount of interest. And so although ICC Nepal did get started, I haven't had much contact since then. But if you can give me an excuse to come back, I'll be back, because I would love to go hiking again in the mountains.
Okay, ma'am. Okay. Well, we're only just looking forward to that. And okay, so now let me take you let me ask you a more serious question, if I may
All
put
right.
it that way. So do you think even with our previous conversations, the ones that we had offline, and with all the things that you've heard about the Nepali arbitration scene, why do you have any opinion on why do you think Nepali business operators and their lawyers should develop expertise in arbitration, or as the even topic of our interview says, expanding scope for arbitration in Nepal. So why do you think arbitration is important for Nepali businesses?
Well, actually, I think maybe there are people in our virtual room here or who are more qualified than I am to answer that. But I'll give you my 2 cents worth anyway, and that is that first of all, arbitration over the last 25 years has become the preferred way of managing and resolving international disputes.
Mhm.
Part of it is because of the flexibility of arbitration.
Yes.
Part of it is because of the can I say, the open-mindedness of the system, the way that the parties can choose their arbitrator, they can choose the kind of process that they need. And at the end of it, of course, the big thing is enforceability, because even if the party doesn't have assets in the place of the arbitration, you can take the award and it's portable. It can be enforced in courts under the New York Convention, under dozens and dozens and dozens. Almost every country that you would be working with is a signatory now to the New York Convention. So the enforceability is a really big thing as well.
Okay, ma'am. So you think Nepal's geographical position, especially between these two growing superpowers, who are quite differing the opinions, so might I say, do you think that is also going to be a reason why Nepal should be more inclined towards arbitration?
Very much so, very much so, especially now, because of course, with the Chinese initiative, the Belt and Road Initiative, which
Yes.
takes the old Silk Road and changes it a bit and electrifies it. This is a great thing for Nepal, because you're between India and China, which are the two of the biggest economies in the world. And of course, there's just so much business going on, even now, and there's not going to be less, there's going to be far more in the coming years as the Belt and Road Initiative progresses. So we're already seeing now lots of disputes coming out of the construction of the Belt and Road, because of course, whenever you have trade or whenever you have construction, you always have disputes. And so the institutions which are in existence now are seeing this happen. And what better time for Nepal to get in on the action and bring some of that to Nepal, for not only for economic reasons, but also just to have the Nepali experts that can be very active in representing Nepali business interests.
Okay. Okay, ma'am. That's I love how you like totally got us the benefits of our geographical location and put it in such a nice way. Thank you for that. And now let me ask you um, something about you personally, like what do you do when you're not arbitrating or teaching or being busy the way you are? What are your hobbies? What do you do?
Sometimes I feel like there isn't any time when I'm not doing one of those things. I do sleep once in a while, but I guess aside from the usual, reading books and movies and things like that, I love to hike. And of course, Hong Kong is a wonderful place for that. People don't really think of Hong Kong as a place to go hiking, but those of us who know it well know that it has some of the most beautiful scenery, and it's a wonderful place to just go off and be on your own for hours at a time. So that's basically what I do in my spare time. I used to do a lot of scuba diving, but haven't been doing that as much lately.
Okay, that's interesting. I'd love to scuba dive at least once in my lifetime, but it sounds too scary for me.
It's another world.
Must be. I cannot even imagine. Okay, ma'am. So let me ask you that professionals in Nepal are interested in arbitration and mediation fields. It's an attractive faculty of law. However, the number of female arbitrators is pretty negligible, and we notice this to be the case in other regions as well. So now, if I'm not wrong, so now how do you suggest we encourage the Nepali women to join arbitration as a faculty of law, and how can we strengthen them in this career?
Well, that's something that I could spend a day or two on.
Okay.
So I'll give you the short version. It is true that when I was in Nepal talking about arbitration, there were no women in the room. I was the only woman in the room. And that's not an unheard of situation for me, but in Nepal, it was quite obvious that there were just no other women. Now, that was a long time ago. That was at the beginning of this century. So I'm hoping that there are at least more law students who are female in Nepal than there were back at that time. And that hopefully some of the judges are also female. And so I'm trusting that there are now some women who are in situations where they are dealing with the law and with dispute resolution, either in arbitration or in mediation. Sometimes it's easier for women to break the barriers by getting in through the mediation route rather than the arbitration route, because traditionally, sometimes many people think of women as being more talented in finding common solutions, negotiated solutions, than being the adversaries, the advocates. And I think most women will probably tell you that they're just as good at both. or that they're better as advocates than they are as mediators. I think it really depends on the individual's background and their training. So with the idea that most women come to arbitration through the law, although it's not only through the law, if there are more women in law school, if those women are taking the initiative to enroll in law school courses which involve litigation rather than simply doing the traditional family law or real estate law or transactional law that women generally get stuck with. And it is hard because litigation it's tough. And if you're not used to that, if your personality is quiet and unassuming, you have to really adjust to that. But more women in school, more women going into litigation types or dispute resolution generally of fields within the law, and making yourself as an individual the person, the go-to person for the people in your firm that are interested in arbitration or mediation. Because a lot of law firms are not using arbitration yet or mediation yet. And so now another thing you can do as a student, as a law student, is get involved in the Vis East Moot, which of course gives people a terrific practical experience. And here I'm my commercial here. The teams get to do what they normally would never do in law school, and that is become part of a team which is dealing with an almost real case. The cases are based on real cases, on real fact situations. They have both merits elements and procedural elements. The merits are always on the CISG, the Convention on the International Sale of Goods. And the procedure is always some aspect of the institutional rules that are being used in the procedure. So the students that do this work from September until March. It's a big job, it's a huge job, but they have invariably told me at the end of it that it's been the most important thing they did in law school, that they learned so much. And so what I'm saying is that by being, by working in this kind of environment, which is, practically real, the students that do the VIS come away ready to hit the ground running. Like when they are hired by a law firm, they know what to do. They know they're going to be expected to take responsibility as part of a team. They know about time management. They know about analytical thinking. They know how to spot issues and then to describe them both in writing and orally. And they've got some really good, advocacy techniques as well. So, law firms hiring students, if they get people that they know have these skills already, they're starting off with a wonderful investment. So I think that that's for me, it's one of the most important things you can do. Now, of course, that's not everybody can't do it. First of all, not everybody has the time that they can do it or can make the time to do it. And the teams have 2 oralists, but usually the school teams can be they can be any number. We've had teams of 20. But there can only be 8 oralists maximum. But what I'm saying is that by working in a team and learning all of these things, the research and the advocacy skills, you're preparing yourself very well. The other things you can do are writing. It may be a case comment. It may be a description of a situation in arbitration or mediation in your country. It may be a call to arms, a call to action. Which can be published somewhere, a blog, usually electronically. We can find all kinds of outlets now for publication.
Okay.
Just a few things, and find someone to help. Ask for help. I was talking to a woman at lunch today who had been assigned to me by Arbitral Women as my mentee, and I said, "But you never called me." And she said, "Oh, I thought you would be busy and I didn't want to take your time." I said, I didn't volunteer to be a mentor for you not to call me. If you don't ask, how can I help? So that I'm not, please don't everybody call me right now.
No,
but there are lots of people that have experience and that are looking to help people get into the business of arbitration, because we've had to work to get through. And so, and we know that it's not easy for a lot of people. There is all kinds of bias against, it may be gender bias, it may be racial bias, it may be geographical bias, it may just be cultural bias. There are all kinds of different biases that we have to overcome and that different other groups have to overcome. And so that's one of the reasons that Arbitral Women and also the Mood Alumni Association has mentors as well. They've got people available that will help if you ask.
Yes, so yeah, that completely answers my upcoming question, which I have not even asked.
Okay.
The question was, well, it's pretty much answered now, but do you think it is imperative for one to be, one, a law student, two, a mooter to become a successful arbitrator later in the future?
Of course not. Of course not. And then, as I said, it's not available to everyone. There are lots of moots, but there are not a lot of arbitration moots. And so it isn't something that everybody can do. But if someone feels that they've got the talent to do it, even if they weren't chosen for the team, then develop it and ask for help. And if you can offer to help, ask whether, if you've got an idea for an article, ask someone who's senior to vet the article with you. If they like what you do, maybe they'll suggest that you help them with an article of theirs. So that can happen. I must say that although it wasn't happening at the time, when I look at my own career, the boosts I got were from people who just believed in me and said, here, you can do this. And oh, well, that's great that you could think I can do it. And so I did it.
Okay. So now let me ask you this, that cases you've dealt with, and of course the very nature of arbitration itself is very confidential, and cases you've dealt with include a wrongful dismissal, international sales, banking, licensing, construction, all these disputes, right? And all of these, including the nature of the work itself, deems it confidential. Yet we're drawn to ask you, what is your most memorable working experience? Is there any particular case which has stuck with you all your life?
My most memorable is probably my first. And it's kind of funny because this was at the time of the Iraq War with America, and it hadn't started yet. But I had been named in a Korean American dispute, and I was named by the Korean party, which I think in itself was a first for a woman to be named by the Korean party. So I found myself in the first procedural conference with about 4 men on one side and about 10 men on the other side, and one co-arbitrator, and behind him, his assistant, who was an American young lady, and no president. The president had not been able to come to Korea for the meeting because his wife wouldn't let him fly. She was afraid he was going to get either blown up in the airplane or stuck somewhere and wouldn't be able to get back to America. And so he agreed to participate by telephone, which at that time was unheard of. Nobody did it then. And and so I looked at the co-arbitrator and he said, will you chair it? Because his English wasn't as good. And although everybody in the room was Korean, I was probably the only person who didn't speak Korean. The language of the arbitration was English. Oh no, there were some lawyers on the other side, on the American side, maybe not all of them spoke Korean. But so I said, okay, that's just fine. And so there I was chairing my first procedural conference. I was just, luckily, I had been warned about it. And so I looked it up before I went, and I made myself lists, and I talked to the co-arbitrator about how to do it. And so it went fine. The only problem was it was really late at night in America. And at one point, our arbitrator, who I will not name, but who was fairly senior at the time, like really senior, at one point, the parties couldn't agree. And so I said, well, Mr. President, could you perhaps weigh in on this? and there was a silence at the other end. And so, Mr. President, excuse me, can you hear us, Mr. President? And after a moment, we realized that he'd fallen asleep.
Okay.
So anyway, that was the beginning of my first major arbitration, and it was probably the most memorable. I have had lots of great experiences, with arbitrators, with working with different tribunals, and that's been terrific. But that was maybe the most memorable and the funniest.
Okay. So now let me take you drastically back from your first experience to where we are currently, where I am currently, that is NIAC. And well, let me tell you that NIAC is, as you know, an up and coming ADR center,
Yes.
a dispute resolution center. And what well, I told you that the very point of the formation of NIAC was to make use of the fact that we are in such a good geographical location, and the peace-loving nature of Nepal that has been the characteristic of Nepal as peace-loving and neutral place has been built through centuries of work by our ancestors and our culture and heritage. So we really wanted to make use of this to provide international standard arbitration services to the world. So as an up and coming center, what is your advice for NIAC on the arbitral front?
Well, let me say there are two major themes to any advice I would give to this brand new organization, bearing in mind what you have just told us about how it started and how the aim is to provide a high quality international experience. And I know that you've partnered with APCAM and that you have the standards of APCAM and that you recognize that you need to have international arbitrators, etc., and people who have experience, so that when people come to Nepal, they will know they're getting a good experience. And that consists of two things. One is the place and one is the people. And the place geographically, as you said, because of the way you're situated, you're in a wonderful place. It's convenient to both east and west. I expect you could get a lot of work from India, a lot of India Chinese work, a lot of India Singapore, India, Australia work, because it's a great place in terms of accessibility. So that's great. But you also need to have the rest of it, because convenience is important, culture is important, but what is also important is that the law be modern and that it be accessible, so that people who are arbitrating using Nepal as a seat will know that they are in a safe place, that the law will be supportive of arbitration, that the judiciary, very important, that the judges understand the law and that they interpret it in the manner and with the principles on which it's based, which is internationality and shall I say, pro-arbitration. In other words, if there's an interpretation to be made of the law, then it should be interpreted in terms of favoring the arbitration going ahead, rather than keeping control of all of this by the state courts. A lot of state courts are very happy to have arbitration around because it makes their dockets shorter. It reduces the wait to get into court, because they know that a lot of commercial people, they don't want to be in court for 4 or 5 or 6 years. They want it over with. And in arbitration, you can get it over with sometimes in 6 months. More likely it'll be a year, maybe a year and a half, but at least you're not talking about 3 or 5 or 7, or if you go to appeal, maybe 10 years. So, and it's really important to have the law that's modern, that people can look it up, which is why I very often recommend that people at least start with a model law as their basis and try and work as closely as possible to that, because it is modern and it does respond to many of the problems that do happen in arbitration. So yeah, the seat itself is important. It's good to have people at the seat that have the expertise, that know about arbitration, that know how to present an arbitration case, which is not exactly the way they would do it in court. And then also among the people, the education, of course, is really important, but we've talked about that. But you've got a roster now of arbitrators. You should endeavor to have as many arbitrators from other countries as well as Nepal, so that people don't feel that it's going to be a Nepali a Nepali event, which would be somehow skewed in favor of the Nepali party. So if you have extra Nepal arbitrators, people that come from outside, then it adds credibility to other users, and people will be more likely to write Nepal as their arbitration center if they know that there's a good law, and B, there's a center there with rules that will help them rather than hinder them in their case. So the people are really, really important, and that, you know, you're working on that already. I know that the center has research facilities, and that you're not simply just being there to appoint arbitrators, you're also there to help develop arbitration in Nepal and make it more accepted, which is fantastic. It won't happen tomorrow, but it'll happen. And there are lots of people. I mean, I can tell you about lots of arbitrators. I was speaking with one just the other night and telling about Nepal, and he's a very senior barrister here in Hong Kong, has been a chartered arbitrator for a long time, but hasn't been doing any. And he said, oh, I'd love to come and do it. He said, I have lots of money. I don't need money. No, not everybody will say that.
Okay. Point note.
But he would be thrilled to be named as an arbitrator, and I'm sure he would do an excellent job.
That's great. That's great to hear from you, and very very assuring for us as well. Now I think I have run out of questions to ask you. So now I will look at the audience and see if somebody has something to ask to Miss Louise Barrington. Actually, a participant did give me a question a few minutes ago. I'll relay it to you, ma'am. They're asking, I think it's from a student from KUSL, they're asking if, well, I think it was in regards to the point where you said where you asked everyone to just call you right away. So how are juniors like expected to find the seniors and find the access to the kind of seniors that they would like to get help from? Because for you, see, let me put this on the table for everyone. Miss Alex Povey from Princeton Mason was a big help for me to reach out to Miss Louise Barrington. She worked as the bridge and was a very big catalyst for me. So like that, I got Miss Alex. So how do other people like reach out to their seniors and their role models, let's say?
Well, as I said, if you don't ask, you're probably not going to get. It's unlikely. So you do need to ask. And Alex is a great person. She's a terrific networker. But you can't all call her either.
Exactly.
Arbitral women for the women who are already involved, but arbitral women does tend to promote women who are already working in dispute resolution. So first of all, get an education in arbitration and mediation, and that may be at law school, or if it's not at law school, it may be at an institution. I don't know whether NIAC is offering arbitration courses yet, but if not, you should be, and I'm quite happy to do that.
We are, ma'am. We are.
That's great. That's great. So these are people who are being introduced to arbitration for the first time, who eventually will end up wanting to be counsel in arbitration, or will be arbitrators one day, or perhaps they won't. Perhaps they'll be in business and they'll be clients. There'll be people who use arbitration because they appreciate it. So education is super important, but also in terms of young people right now have a great advantage due to COVID, because COVID has put so many of us online, and especially at the beginning, a couple of years ago when it first started, it was pretty scary for us older arbitrators to think about doing hearings online. Now, the Vis East moot was the very first moot to go online 2 years ago. And of course, the Vis Vienna came right after, and many, many more now have happened remotely. And that has done a couple of things. It's allowed some schools that didn't have the opportunity to travel to participate virtually, but it's also given the juniors in law firms the chance to become a member of an arbitration team or a dispute resolution team, which they might not have been able to do before. Why? Because they understand far better than us older people how the internet works. They're not afraid of pushing the wrong button and cutting everybody off. They know how to screen share, which I've now learned, but I didn't know at first. So in fact, all of these things which are second nature to people under 30, but we've had to learn and be nervous about learning because we don't want to look like fools. We're the arbitrators. We want to make sure people think that we are competent. But the younger people can help the older people, look competent and professional and make things go smoothly. And that's giving young people access to watching the procedures, to maybe not taking an active role at first, but at least seeing what happens and what works, what happens in a procedural conference, what happens in an evidentiary hearing. And that wasn't happening before. So this is, it's really ideal. And so I think it's going to really help women and younger people and other people who've traditionally been left out to get in faster.
Okay, ma'am, that's wonderful advice. And I hope all the students from Kathmandu University School of Law, which is my alma mater, are keeping notes of everything you've said. Now, do we have any other questions from the audience? I think Dr. Yo wanted to ask something. Is he here now?
No, I'm here, but I
wasn't.
Sorry. Yeah, I wasn't meant to asking anything. Like, I wasn't planning to ask anything.
Well, can I ask you something?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'd like to know, maybe, I think, you're from Kathmandu. Why don't you tell the audience how you got to where you are today? From when I knew each other, when you and I knew each other, way back when.
No, I was actually, when Shreya asked me if I want to ask something, I was trying to tell a few things that, and thank Louise for those things. When Louise visited Kathmandu in, it was 1999, and that was the time when the new Arbitration Act was being discussed in Nepal. The new Arbitration Act, for your information, Louise, now is very much what you call the model law. It's a copy of the model law rather than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
But then you actually did a really good job in paving that way to the changing. It was already on discussion, but then there was a lot of things you raised with the Chamber of Commerce, the Federation of Nepali Chambers of Commerce and Industry, and those things. And one of the things on new Arbitration Act, which you probably remember, we went to meet the then Chief Justice that time. It was Bishwanath Upadhyay. He was just retired, and he was, and then we actually met both brother Kedarnath as well at the same time, and then they were kind of influential on that time. They did put some of the what you call advice to the Law Commission after meeting you, Louise. So although you may not know those things, I had not actually heard.
I'm delighted to hear it.
So it was like we never got a chance to tell each other these things.
But what about you? What about you, Yogesh? You were the first member of the ICC Court of Arbitration for Nepal. And how did that happen? And what was your experience like?
Basically, I was working with the Chamber of Commerce. I was their legal advisor at that time. And some of the issues we had was the dispute resolution. As you said that there were like so many, it's mainly the backlog in the court. That's what they were really worried about. Like, oh yeah, our cases, it takes really long to settle. And it was, yeah, many people from Nepal would, I don't know what they would remember. It was Mahesh Agrawal who was the chair that time. And then, yeah, we said that, okay, we need to do something. And that's the point when I contacted Louise. I think I met Louise, yeah, I met Louise before that. It was in IBA conference.
That's
And
right, yeah.
then, yeah, I just met her. It was in Delhi in IBA conference. Just before that, when I was still very young, kind of a student. And then and I just contacted Louise and saying, yeah, can we do something in Nepal? And she said that, okay, I'll come to do a
We sure
workshop.
can.
Yeah, so to do a workshop in Nepal, and then she did do a very good, it was a really good workshop in Nepal Chamber of Commerce. That was like long ago. I don't, yeah, my memory has faded now, even, but I can remember Louise coming in there and then giving a really good talk, encouraging the arbitration. There was another person who used to work as a really good arbitrator, and senior people in Nepal, like Matrika, I would remember, like IC Sharma, Ishwari Chandra Sharma. And yeah, she inspired some of those people. We sat down, and then those people were the one who actually contributed on development of the new sort of like new Arbitration Act in Nepal. So that was one point. And then there was the Foreign Investment and Technology Transfer Law that time, the Act. And that was also because there was, Louise actually made the what you call the head of the foreign investment section in the Department of Industry, who was there. It was in the corner of the Chamber of Commerce. We sat down. Oh no, it was in a lunch second day. And then he, I forgot his name now, but he said that, okay, it's a really good idea. And then if we want to encourage the foreign investment, we need to put that as a legal requirement in the act itself. And that's how the new rule, which was drafted at that time in 2000, came with the, the provision of mandatory arbitration in terms of the dispute between the foreign investor and a Nepalese investor or the company. So those were the things that Louise kind of influenced without probably knowing that she did.
I'm amazed. I'm thrilled to hear this. I'm hearing this for the first time. But Yogesh, what about you? How did you progress? You're now teaching in the UK.
Yeah, I'm now teaching in the UK. Then it was like, then after I started traveling to Hong Kong for different reasons, and many of the days, Louise probably would remember a Barrington hotel. When somebody asked me, where are you staying? And then Louise used to tell them that, oh yeah, he lives in Barrington Hotel. So yeah, I got very, a lot of support from Louise on academic and different sort of thing.
The Barrington Hotel is closed, by the way.
Yeah,
so please,
I know.
So please, I'll help you, a lot of people, but I can't put you up now. Okay.
Yeah, I know. No, I even used Barrington Hotel in London. Do you remember that? When you were in King's
Yes.
College?
Yes.
So yeah, so it was like a lot of different supports I got from Louise in terms of the advice and in terms of like how I should progress. And one of the advice he gave me in that time was, why don't you think about getting education on this sort of thing, like arbitration, dispute resolution. And then I was going to join a degree in the University of Hong Kong. I went there as well, where I met Louise introduced me with other two people, Robert Morgan, and
Mm.
Robert is actually here, Louise, these days.
So I hear.
Yeah, he's in London, is east of London somewhere here, and yeah, and Arthur McInnes. Both of them were great on giving advice, but unfortunately, I couldn't complete my degree in there because I got another chance to do a degree in Queen Mary, University of London, which was funded by the World Bank that time. So there I met someone Louise knows very well, Lucas Mistelis.
Mhm.
Yeah, he was some of help on thinking about, you know, arbitration and those sort of thing. So basically then I finished my PhD in here, and during my PhD time, because of my those connections, I started teaching the main teaching I used to do back in Sheffield, Queen Mary, and wherever I have been was the international arbitration and the national international sale of goods and those type of things, which actually did help me to understand the general issue of arbitration. I've written one or two pieces on those, not very much because I was mainly focused on intellectual property on my PhD, so it was kind of divided between two. So that's why I have not really um, written a lot of work on that one. But now I have established a course on construction law, and arbitration is a big part of that, and have been writing on that. So there are a few publications coming on that side. Um,
That's
During the
wonderful.
conversation, Louis and Shreya, they raised the issue of why women are less in arbitration. And then you said about Nepal, but then it's not actually in Nepal, it's actually all over the world. If you look into the number of the arbitrators, like the people who are involved in arbitrators, it's like a lot less in all over the world, not only in Nepal. I do like offer the CPD event for the institution called Royal Institution for Chartered Surveyors. They are the construction engineers. And the people who are participating there, like coming to those programs, they are more or less like 90% men's um, rather than like ladies on there. So
Well,
that's,
Yogesh, I think that RICS is a particular organization where the chartered surveyors, they're all working in construction. And
yeah,
construction, of course, has always traditionally been a very male bastion. And so and of course, a lot of arbitration is about construction. So it kind of, it's a vicious circle. But
yeah,
yes, I think you're quite right that that there are
yes,
a lot more women now than there were, but there are still
yeah.
areas like construction where it's kind of hard for women to get in many places.
Yeah, if you look into like engineering these days, because I'm based in engineering department now,
Mhm.
and if you look into the engineering courses and surveyor courses, they are kind of 50-50 and the composition. But again, people who would go on specializing a particular area, because the RITS does have a dispute resolution wing of itself. And then people who go to specialize, they are really so less in that area. And one of the thing when I was like working in different law schools, around like 7 different law schools in the UK here, something which I noticed, not only in the law school education, but also if you look into now it's changed, which is like this SQE, solicitor qualifying examination. But then I do externally examine the arbitration modules um, on the LPC, the legal practice course with the University of Law. And then the problem which we were discussing the other day was, you know, arbitration and dispute resolution being very, very important. It is still an option module in most of these, like, you know, qualifying examination and in the law school. And if we are trying to say that, you know, the court cannot actually take up all the cases and the arbitration is very effective and those things, then why don't we make these like arbitration dispute resolution module as one of the core rather than making it option. And that's something we are actually discussing in the UK at the moment, because I work for the higher education academy as well on their few sort of development program. So we are having that discussion in the UK, like, can we actually make, you know, particularly arbitration as a core module, as it is like the criminal law or is administrative law sort of thing? Can we do that sort of thing? And is there something we are trying to investigate that? And that could be a way forward for, particularly for Nepal, looking into, you know, trying to see if we can have that as rather than option in
Yes.
the degree course, as well as, you know, in other like professional body examinations, such as I forgot like how the bar exam was in Nepal, but yeah.
I think, you know, I don't know how much pushback there would be to have it as a core course, but I guess my own feeling is that if there were pushback to making it a core course, and I can see there might be some reluctance because there's so many different things that law schools want to teach their students. And it might be an idea to incorporate a section on ADR into a civil procedure course, so that although students learn their state court civil procedure, they also realize that there is this whole ADR trip that they can take. And if there's an introduction to ADR, then maybe there'll be more uptake on an elective course the next year by the students that have been interested in it. So, because it's pretty revolutionary to start with, you know, from nothing and have it become a core course. And I think you might get a lot of pushback there, but even if you, as I said, just a small wedge in the door might be what you need.
Yes, let me please add a little something here. So not on the scale of what you're talking about, but even I recommended this to my university, that we were only introduced to dispute resolution methods, arbitration, mediation, and all that too in a one package subject at the 5th year of law school, which I believe should have been in the first or at least in the 2nd year, because as we're understanding the traditional litigation system, I think we should also be introduced to arbitration, mediation, and all these other forms of dispute resolution. Maybe not an entire subject on it right away, but at least as a course or incorporated, as you said, as the civil into the civil procedure, so that we could at least know about it, and later when we reach the 5th year we can study about it in depth. So yes, this is the one suggestion I made to the university a couple of days back. And with this now, Louise, Dr. Yog, I think I would have to bring you here to another question from the audience, which I believe should be our last question because we are also kind of running out of time. So Miss Ayusha Joshi asked, it was great hearing from you, Louise. Can you tell us what the, sorry, I just got another question, and okay. Ayusha Joshi, yes. Can you tell us what were the obstacles that you faced in your arbitral journey and how you're able to cope with it? And let me add another question from Ms. Pushpa Basyal so that you can answer them both simultaneously. She is asking, since you are the co-founding president of Arbitral Women, can you share us more about Arbitral Women? So these are the two questions, and I think they should be the last two questions.
Okay. As for obstacles, I guess I grew up with my parents saying, you like to argue, you're going to be a lawyer. I never thought that it was going to be a problem until I spoke just before I went to law school to a woman lawyer who was somewhat senior to me. And I told her I was going to law school, and she said, well, you're a strong woman. I think you can handle it. And that was the first time I thought, oh, maybe this is going to be harder than I thought. But I didn't go in with the idea of there are going to be a lot of obstacles. I went in with the idea of, well, this is what I'm going to do. So maybe my naivety protected me in a way, because I just didn't expect to be refused. So I don't really feel I have a particular method of dealing with obstacles, except to just step over them, you know, hopefully with as little fuss as possible, but step over those that you can. And then, of course, you know, there are obstacles where you try to do something. For example, it was very difficult for me to get a job in Paris after I had my degree, but I wasn't qualified. And I could tell I was going to be shunted into sort of lower administrative rather than legal jobs at the time. And at the time, I didn't think about it as being a woman, but now looking back, of course, they would never have proposed that kind of thing to a man had I been male. So part of it was not realizing there were obstacles. And then I didn't notice the absence of women in arbitration until I started working in the field and realizing that I was there as an administrator, as a director of the institute, but I wasn't doing any arbitration. I was talking about it. I was teaching it because I was, training young arbitrators, but I wasn't doing it. And then I began to realize that there was this dichotomy that all the arbitrators were men. And that's one of the reasons that Arbitral Women started. And just very, very briefly, because I know that we've spent a lot more time than I think you planned to, but Arbitral Women began as just really my own curiosity, and I wanted to meet more of the women that were in the field that I'd heard about but hadn't actually met. I organized with my colleague Mireille Philippe at the ICC a dinner. We invited some people, and we had a restaurant set up, and my secretary called me and said, "We've got to get a new restaurant. There's 60 women coming." I thought we'd get 12 maybe. And so obviously I wasn't the only person who was wondering about this. And so that's how we started. Back at that time, they didn't keep statistics about how many women were involved in arbitrations, but Mireille, because she worked with the ICC, had access. She took the trouble to go back to 1993, and this was only 10 years ago. She took the case loads, and she found out that in 1993, that first year, 2% of ICC's arbitrations had a woman arbitrator, 2%. And it's now something like 20%, it's 20 to 25%. So
Just
in the 25
years.
Well, no, she did the research 10 years ago, but she went back to 1993, which is like over 25 years ago. So in a quarter of a century, we've gone from 2% to anywhere from 17 to 25 or 30%, depending on which institution you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
So there has been progress, but it's not enough. And so Arbitral Women, it exists, and we've got 1,000 women in 40 different countries now. And it exists to promote women in arbitration and in mediation, mostly internationally, but not confined to that. And to that end, our members can put their profiles up so that people can look for them. If they're looking for some skill or some language ability, or a woman arbitrator in a particular place to either do an arbitration or maybe to speak at a conference or to do some writing or give a legal opinion, they can find people at the Arbitral Women website. We also have events all over the world. As I said, they are very, how can I say, grassroots. At lunch today, I told you I was talking to a bunch of Arbitral Women, and someone said, well, what about, we should do something on banking. And I said, go ahead. Start it, and we'll help. And that's how it works. So it is for people who are working in arbitration or in mediation. We don't have a student group. We do have a young practitioners group. The Moot Alumni Association, of course, those people who've done the Moot, there is an alumni association which takes students, arbitrators, professors, coaches, anybody who's been at the VIS Moot or the VIS East Moot. But also women need to go to the people that they're working with. Mm-hmm. If you're already in a firm or in a company, and talk about arbitration, say that you're interested in it, say that you're available, do the research. as I said, write and contact people.
Okay.
You may have just the skill that I'm looking for in my next arbitration. I don't know.
Don't hesitate to speak up and ask for help. That's right, ma'am. Now, should
One
I?
thing about the obstacle, Shreya, sorry, yeah, somebody asked.
No,
a
no,
question.
sir, please go on.
One thing about those obstacle, because we are professional, and then there are success and there are other way around in many cases. So we need to think about in a learning journey for the obstacle. So if you have an obstacle, then you can actually learn a lot from that, why there is an obstacle, going to the root of that, and then learning from that obstacle,
Mhm.
how could you overcome. So we all have that sort of power in our mind to overcome those. So if you think about an obstacle, and then, oh yeah, there is an obstacle, I'm not going to go that route, you're never going to be successful. Whereas if you think about an obstacle as a learning curve, and it teaches me something to cope with, then probably that will help you to overcome those obstacles as well as anything in the future.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
It doesn't, yeah, that good song. Doesn't kill you, makes you stronger, yeah.
All right. So now, I don't think we have any more questions from the audience. Also, we cannot take any more questions from the audience. Now, we've come pretty much to the end of the interview session. Thank you so much for taking time out of your super busy schedule to accommodate us, ma'am. We are inspired by hearing you. I thank you wholeheartedly on behalf of the entire NIAC family for agreeing to be on the inaugural session of the NIAC interview series and for delivering such an interesting talk. Thank you so very much.
You're very welcome, Shreya. It's been my pleasure, and I hope that I will see some of you in person very soon. Thanks.
Okay. Now with this, we have come to the end of the first session of the NIAC interview series. My words of gratitude won't be enough, but thank you for making this happen, Ms. Alex Povey from our partner Pinsent Masons, and to Dr. Yog Upadhyay for making, adding this Nepali touch, a further Nepali touch to our interview. This is going to be in our official YouTube channel and shared in the social media. Please give out your comments and let us know how you liked our inaugural session. Thank you so very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I think we can leave now. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
I will
you very
close the
much.
session in a sec.
Okay. Do you want to close it now?
I think I can close it now. Yes, it looks like
Okay.
everything's
No.
okay. Thank you, Shreya.
Thank
Well
you.
done.
Bye-bye, everyone.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.